Buenas noches, buenas noches. Un gran abrazo a toditos, los estoy abrazando a toditos, cada uno de ustedes donde quiera que estén. Me da tanto gusto verlo, las caras bonitas y las caras feas como la de Eduardo, pero no importa. Saludos a todo el mundo. Everybody is welcome. What a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to see so many of you and to connect. I happen to be in North Carolina. I just finished a visit at Duke Divinity School, where we're going to have our 33rd Hispanic Summer Program next summer. So we'll be here in North Carolina, and it was a great visit. So welcome again. This is our 5th Hispanic Summer Program Exchange, and we're delighted to have Dr. Chris Tirres join us as our speaker. The exchange began as a way to increase our presence and our conversations with our alums, with our community, with our students, with faculty, with our sponsoring schools, a way to engage with the scholarship of our faculty, of our Latinx scholars who are producing and doing great work, and a way to engage one another in a public way in conversations that really matter to the community. So I am delighted to have Chris join us this evening. And it's just a joy to have him. Chris and I go way back. I remember Chris when I was a director of the HTI, and he was a doctoral student. So there you go. And we're still just as young and beautiful as we were then, Chris. I mean, time means nothing to us, Chris. But anyway, it's great to have you here. I wanted also to say that tonight is a very special night for us because we are inaugurating and unrolling. I don't know, Jorge, that is the correct IT term, but we're our Alumni Network is live. So we're inviting all of you to join our Alumni Network, and we wanted to organize all of your energy. We want to organize your skills. We want to come together around activities that are meaningful to our alums and our faculty and our friends and those people who are interested in the HSP, and begin to expand the programming so that we could do other kinds of activity with our alums, with folks who have graduated, who have been in the program, folks who are interested in being part of the work that we're doing. So the Alumni Network is really something exciting and special for us. And the page is live. It's right there on our website, and Jorge is showing it to you on the screen. And you can register. And if you're interested, we'd like to identify those folks who'd like to join and be part of the council. This is kind of to begin to organize our ideas and the activities we'd like to do. So you'll have an opportunity there to identify and say, yes, I'd like to be part of the organizing council to kind of get things moving. We want this to be your network. We want it to reflect your interests and what you'd like to do as part of the HSP family. So it's important for us that you join. You participate as an alum, great. If you're a faculty member, bienvenido, welcome. If you're a friend and you want to continue to be connected to the HSP, also join us. We'd like for this network to be wide and be broad so that we can have different activities around the country and that we could promote the different kind of conversations in different settings, not just with the Zoom. So again, we want to invite you to be a part of that and to join us. Tonight, as I said, our lecturer is Dr. Chris Tirres. And Chris is currently teaching at DePaul, the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, where he is Vincent DePaul Professor of Religious Studies and also Inaugural Endowed Professor of Diplomacy and Interreligious Engagement, which is exciting. It's new things happening, and I'm glad that Chris is right there with all his energy and his creativity to be a part of it. So we welcome Chris, and we invite him to speak to us tonight and speak to our hearts and to our minds. So bienvenido, Chris.
Thank you so much, Daisy. What a privilege and an honor it is for me to be with you all tonight. A big abrazo to everybody. I think of all the participants, about a third are from El Paso and about maybe 75% are my family. So saludos a mi familia. I think my parents are on the call as well. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. But great to see so many familiar faces and new friends as well. It's really an honor for me to do this thing tonight. As Daisy said earlier, we've known each other for a long time. And I've learned very quickly that whatever Daisy Machado does, it's going to be a quality program. So she did it in HTI. She continues to do it in the Hispanic Summer Program. And I just have to say that my first time with the Hispanic Summer Program teaching was this past summer. And it was just such a wonderful experience to work both with Dr. Machado and Dr. Jorge Rodriguez, on this program. And I know that we also have some folks who were in that class. So you may hear some common themes, some common names to the folks who took my class. But it's wonderful to be part of this community and to share these ideas. You know, I think one of the important things about the HSP is not only to create a space where we could come together and draw on our common cultural inheritance. We have so many riches in terms of what our culture gives us and what our family gives us and what our religious traditions give us. And so to create a safe space to talk about that is so important. And that's definitely one thing that the Hispanic Summer Program does. But the other thing that it does is it allows us to create new forms of knowledge. And to me, that's really exciting. And hopefully the new knowledge that we create together through classes, through discussions like these, through ongoing panels, presentations, this will be new knowledge that we can take to many communities, including the ones from which we come. So it's just an honor to be part of this. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about the presentation. I think I'm going to be put into one of the small groups afterwards, and I'll sit in and listen. But please feel free to be in touch if you have ideas, suggestions about the routes that I'm taking, new questions that I should be entertaining, because this is really a process of doing scholarship, theology, religious studies en conjunto. And HSP really models that for us. So tonight I'm going to be talking about a project that I'm working on, a book that I'm working on that is entitled Liberating Spiritualities in the Américas. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and get that started. Okay, you all can see this? Okay.
Yep, looks great.
So I only have about 12 slides, and they're supporting slides, and I prepared some text, so I'm going to read from this text. And this is really part of the introductory chapter. So it's my way of setting up the project and setting up some of the parameters and some of the questions. So here we go. For 5 years, before the onset of COVID-19 changed everything, I drove once a month to a detention facility about an hour from my home to sit with detained immigrants and listen to their stories. I did so as a volunteer with the Chicago-based Interfaith Community for Detained Immigrants, ICDI, an organization that provides support for immigrants caught in the immigration detention process. As the name of the organization indicates, ICDI is intentionally interfaith. Founded by two determined Catholic Sisters of Mercy, the organization welcomes volunteers from all religious traditions, as well as those who claim no religious affiliation, to participate in the work of immigrant accompaniment and solidarity. The jail visitation program I participated in was one of several outreach efforts sponsored by the organization. Those of us who volunteered with the jail visitation program would spend a little over 2 hours meeting with detained individuals, the vast majority of whom were men. We usually did so in 3 successive sessions consisting of 3 to 5 individuals each. Many of the men were young, 18 to 22 years old, and had been recently detained. All they had seen of the United States were a series of detention facilities, as they were often shuffled from one to the next. Some of the men were older, anywhere from 25 to 65 years of age, and had lived in the United States for years, if not decades. Many had spouses and children who are US citizens. More than anything, these longtime residents simply wanted to be reunited with their families. Most all detainees were born in Latin America, but it was not uncommon to see others from Africa, Asia, and Europe. Accordingly, although the majority of our conversations were in Spanish, some volunteers also led discussions in English or French. In addition, 1 or 2 members of our volunteer group would spend part of the time meeting with a smaller group of detained women, mostly from Latin America, in another part of the jail. Our role as ICDI volunteers was relatively straightforward. We were there to listen to these individuals and let them know that they were not forgotten. Sometimes our conversations were filled with lighthearted small talk. On any given day, we might discuss their previous line of work, or what they did for recreation in the detention facility, or what kinds of food they most look forward to eating again once they were released. Other times, our conversations would turn to weightier topics. Recently arrived detainees often expressed great worry about returning to their place of birth, given the threat of gang violence in their home countries. For example, Edwin from Honduras, and I'm using pseudonyms here to protect their privacy, explained how both his father and brother had been killed by a cartel in his small hometown, and that if he returned, he would surely be next. Many longtime US residents expressed concern over no longer being able to support their families, and many appeared visibly shaken by the prospect of not being able to see their family again in the United States. Such was the case with Bertin, who was born in Mexico, but who had been living in the Midwest for over 25 years with his wife and 5 children, ages 14, 12, 10, 6, and 3, all United States citizens. Without a doubt, inmates found the experience of being in detention fiercely disorienting. Speaking of his experience with detention officials and other ICE officers, Jacinto from El Salvador noted that, quote, "They treat us as if we are animals." This sentiment was expressed frequently among inmates. With minimal exercise options, inmates were often bored and in some cases depressed. As Luis from Mexico told me, sometimes after breakfast, I returned to bed and tried to go back to sleep. Making matters even worse, many inmates had no clear sense of how long they would be in detention, especially if their case was being appealed. While most inmates were typically detained for 3 to 6 months, it was not uncommon to encounter immigrants who had been detained for more than a year. Unlike traditional prisoners, immigrant detainees are not guaranteed a public defender under US law. As such, many inmates could not afford a lawyer and were left to navigate the labyrinthian court system almost entirely on their own. As unpleasant and disorienting as these experiences were, many inmates nevertheless approached their time in detention as an opportunity to engage in significant forms of reorientation. Many reflected deeply on their life, their priorities, and their relationship with God. While some looked to the past, others focused on their present circumstances and the underlying social forces that brought them to this point in their life. Many said they had become disillusioned with the American dream and tired of the myriad ways they were looked down upon because of their language, economic status, and/or the color of their skin. As Israel from Mexico told me, if I do end up back in my home country, at least I know I will be treated like a human being. I, along with my fellow volunteers, found it striking that in spite of the tremendous hardships that these detainees faced, they often expressed a profound gratitude for the very little that they did have, be it as simple as the present moment, their health, the safety of their family members, another day of life. Inmates often connected their gratitude to their faith in God, as when they would frequently add to their comments phrases such as, "Si Dios quiere," "Con el favor de Dios," or "Gracias a Dios." It is worth noting that many of the individuals with whom I spoke had only loose ties to religion in its formal sense. While most considered themselves Catholic or Christian, a majority acknowledged that they attended church infrequently, even in the best of times. That said, it is fair to say that these men were deeply spiritual, given the reverence and gratitude they expressed for the small things in life. Many pointed out that their time in detention had afforded them opportunities to pray more, read the Bible, and grow deeper in their faith. As Juan from Guatemala shared, before detention, I didn't read the Bible. I didn't have time for God. Now my situation has made me think. I have come to analyze things. And I have asked forgiveness for the way I used bad words and didn't respect people. Toward the end of his comments, he added, God is good. God does not fail us. The more time I spent with detainees, the more I came to see how important faith was to their journey. This word, faith, however, can mean many things. Typically, it is used to reference a particular religious tradition, such as the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, the Islamic faith. Especially among Abrahamic traditions, faith is often used as a proxy for institutional religion. Other times, the word suggests a more diffuse sense of spirituality that may or may not have a particular connection to institutional religion. It is quite common these days, for example, to hear someone say, I'm spiritual, but not religious. As this position suggests, although one may not belong to a formal faith tradition, one may still orient oneself in the world in a way that is deeply religious, or as many today prefer to say, spiritual. Those who identify as spiritual but not religious might, for example, approach the world with reverence, awe, and gratitude, traits that are commonly valued within institutional forms of religion without actually participating in organized religion themselves. A similar dynamic may be seen among Native American communities for whom faith has less to do with adherence to specific religious traditions and more to do with cultivating a comprehensive outlook on life. And this is one reason why it is somewhat rare to hear the phrase Native American religions and more commonplace to hear of Native American spirituality. As examples like these help to illustrate, the meaning of faith is quite malleable, a fact that I saw firsthand through my time with detained immigrants. In many cases, detainees spoke of faith in connection to their ties, however loose or tight, to institutional religion. Whether they identified as católico, cristiano, creyente, or non-believer, no soy religioso, some would say. They often describe faith in terms of their proximity or distance, their proximity to or distance from organized religion. At other times, however, detainees expressed faith through their everyday actions and their general attitude towards life. For many, faith was an ongoing process of making sense of and affirming one's basic humanity. We see this, for instance, when Juan from Guatemala describes how his experience in detention made him think, prompting him to analyze things more. As distressing as immigrant detention is, the experience of being confined for months on end afforded detainees like Juan opportunities to reflect deeply on their circumstances, take stock of the injustices that they have faced, and create new patterns of instilling hope in themselves and each other. By creating these new habits of mind, detainees reoriented themselves in fundamental ways. As I argue in the book that I'm working on, such habits are themselves significant expressions of faith that go well beyond our usual understandings of the concept. Rather than approach faith in terms of one's proximity to institutional religion and or adherence to doctrinal authority, my project illuminates the power of active forms of faith that are religious or spiritual by virtue of their everyday quality and their liberating function. You all following me so far? That's part one. So my project explores this active, qualitative, and functional sense of spirituality through the groundbreaking work of 6 20th century liberation thinkers. Peruvian Marxist philosopher José Carlos Mariátegui, Brazilian educator and philosopher Paulo Freire, Mexican-American constructive theologian Virgilio Elizondo, Chicana cultural and feminist theorist Gloria Anzaldúa, and Cuban mujerista theologian Ada María Isasi-Díaz, and Brazilian ecofeminist theologian Ivone Gebara. Featured here are socially engaged thinkers from both North America and South America, theologians and non-theologians, and theists and non-theists. As the reader will find, these figures demonstrate varying commitments to institutional forms of religion. Some identify as practicing Catholics, while others have long left the church. 3 common traits, however, connect them all. All of the figures in this book are highly critical of colonial forms of Christianity. Each understands spirituality as an integral quality and function of human experience, and each champions spirituality as a potent tool for social transformation. Now, I don't have time to get into all of these, so I would just like to focus on one, which is the one that's in bold, number 2. What do we mean by spirituality as an integral quality and function of human experience? To begin with, as a quality of human experience, spirituality reflects a core aspect of what it means to be human. Whereas a century ago, spirituality was thought to refer primarily to the interior life of the Christian, today the term has a much wider applicability, reflecting a core aspect of our lived experience at large. As noted scholar Sandra Schneiders observes, the term spirituality has undergone an astounding expansion in recent decades and is being gradually adopted by Protestantism, Judaism, non-Christian religions, and even such secular movements as feminism and Marxism to refer to something that, while difficult to define, is experienced as analogous in all of these movements. In no small measure, the idea of spirituality has grown to include the life of the person as a whole, including its bodily, psychological, social, and political dimensions. Many US Latinx scholars resonate with this expansive understanding of spirituality. Anita de Luna, for example, writes that spirituality is about how a person relates to the totality of life. It is made explicit in worship, but also in the practical and concrete ways of how one lives the communal values that ground one's life and are transmitted through culture. Similarly, Edwin Aponte describes spirituality as that daily mix of practices, beliefs, and rituals, small and large in diverse contexts, that point to an abiding and overarching sense of compelling impulse and desire. The flip side to these broad approaches is that the term spirituality, like psychology, is unavoidably ambiguous. And it can simultaneously refer to, number 1, a fundamental dimension of the human being. Number 2, the lived experience, which actualizes that dimension. And number 3, the academic discipline, which studies that experience. Although spirituality may indeed be a slippery term, a number of scholars offer some helpful ways to think about it. Schneiders, for instance, makes a useful distinction between dogmatic and anthropological approaches to spirituality. Whereas a dogmatic approach, typified by the work of C.A. Bernard, roots spirituality exclusively to the Christian tradition and holds that, quote, any experience which is not explicitly Christian can be called spirituality only by way of extension or comparison. In contrast to that, an anthropological approach, typified by the work of J.C. Breton, holds that the structure and dynamics of the human person as such are the locus of the emergence of the spiritual life. Accordingly, within an anthropological frame, spirituality is an activity of human life as such. As Schneiders explains, if this activity is open to engagement with the absolute, then it becomes religious in character. Likewise, if this activity makes special appeals to the person of Jesus Christ through the gift of the Holy Spirit, then this spirituality would become Christian in character. The important point here, however, is that in an anthropological approach, spirituality is not limited to traditional religious or Christian imaginaries. In principle, Schneiders writes, it is equally available to every human being who is seeking to live an authentically human life. Roger Haidt offers another helpful approach to spirituality. Although he is best known for his work in theology, Haidt openly acknowledges that, methodologically speaking, spirituality always precedes religion and theology. As he puts it, religion, church, and church structure have their source and ground in spirituality. Like Schneiders, Haidt appeals to a spirituality as a basic anthropological reality that all humans can possess, regardless of creed, and he affirms the viability of secular forms of spirituality. In an attempt to bridge secular culture and more explicitly religious orientations, Haidt defines spirituality as the logic or character or consistent quality of a person's or a group's pattern of living insofar as it is measured before some ultimate reality. Whether one is religious in a traditional sense or spiritual in a more secular sense, Haidt underscores how an appreciation for the transcendent or ultimate reality can emerge organically within human experience at large. Other prominent scholars of spirituality, such as Michael Buckley and Ronald Rolheiser, underscore the ways in which spirituality is grounded in human experience. Rolheiser, for example, likens spirituality to a kind of unceasing desire, which he describes as an internal fire that marks human experience at large. He writes, long before we do anything explicitly religious at all, we have to do something about the fire that burns within us. What we do with that fire, how we channel it, is our spirituality. Thus, we all have a spirituality, whether we want to or not, whether we are religious or not. Irrespective of whether or not we let ourselves be consciously shaped by explicit religious ideas, we act in a way that leave us healthy or unhealthy, loving or bitter. What shapes our actions is our spirituality. Now, I find Rolheiser's formulation quite helpful because it not only locates spirituality in human experience, but also underscores how spirituality itself is a form of human action. As Rolheiser makes clear, spirituality is what we do with our internal fire, and how we channel it is what gives spirituality its meaning. As such, if we want to know what spirituality really is, we must consistently inquire into what spirituality does in particular circumstances. As the American pragmatic philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce so convincingly argues, all meaning, is best acquired not through a priori appeals to self-evidence, as Descartes presumed, or through abstract definition, as Leibniz argued, but rather by remaining ever attentive to the conceivably practical effects that any given idea may have. For Peirce, our conception of an idea's effects, in fact, constitutes the whole of its meaning. So to put this in terms of spirituality, to know fully what spirituality is, we must consistently attend to what it does or can potentially do in experience. Or to put the matter even more directly, spirituality is what we actively make of it. Many of the ideas laid out here, which connect spirituality to questions of experience, quality, function, deep-seated values, and human action, are informed by my work in philosophical pragmatism and liberation theology. In my first book, I laid the foundation for my own approach to spirituality, which is informed by both of these rich intellectual traditions. In my present work, I extend this analysis to inform my reading of the 6 contemporary thinkers I discussed earlier. As such, my present work both extends and sharpens the dialogue between pragmatism and liberation theology. So by way of conclusion, it goes without saying that pragmatism and liberation theology are incredibly diverse traditions that contain a multiplicity of voices, viewpoints, and internal critiques. Within each, I have found especially instructive the perspectives of scholars of color and feminists who engage these traditions in new and refreshing ways. My approach to pragmatism is therefore as much informed by the early contributions of Charles Sanders Peirce and William James, John Dewey, as it is by the more recent work of Cornel West, Eddie Glaude Jr., Rebecca Chopp, and Gregory Fernando Papas. These and many other scholars help to show that the method of pragmatism has wide applicability for communities who find themselves, in the words of Enrique Dussel, on the underside of modernity. Similarly, just as I am indebted to the first wave of Latin American liberation theologians like Gustavo Gutierrez, Leonardo Boff, Ignacio Ellacuría, so too do I find great value in the work of second and third wave liberationist voices, including US Latinx theologians and Latina feminists. US Latino theologians like Virgilio Elizondo, Orlando Espín, and Roberto Goizueta have made a compelling case for the liberating potential of cultural practices like popular religion. In turning toward questions of culture and aesthetics, US Latinx theology has shed light on these vital aspects of human experience that were largely ignored by early Latin American liberation theology. That said, in pivoting in this way, US Latinx theology has often distanced itself so much from its Latin American counterpart that sometimes it is unclear how the two traditions are intimately connected, especially at the level of methodology. Fortunately, Latin American and Latina feminists like Ivone Gebara, Maria Pilar Aquino, Ada María Isasi-Díaz, and Michelle Gonzalez have offered incisive perspectives that connect the cultural aesthetics of everyday life, which has been a major focus of Latinx theology, to the larger structural and ideological concerns of Latin American liberation theology. In no small measure, Latin American and Latina feminists have served as a crucial link between these two traditions, and their methodological insights greatly inform my present work. So this is probably a good place to stop. And I will leave you with a few questions that I believe that Jorge is going to put up in a second. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tirres, for your conversation and for your great remarks. Thank you so much. You've left us with a lot to think about. So here are the questions that Dr. Tirres has offered for the group, and I'm sending right now over the chat Google Doc with the questions themselves. As we always do in our HSP Exchange, we have a moment for small group discussion and reflection. So in one moment here, I'm going to send you off into your groups. If people would be open to opening that Google Doc, then you can have the questions right in front of you. In about 15 minutes, we'll bring back the small groups. And after that, we'll have a larger group discussion before closing out. Thank you again, Dr. Tirres. And I hope that everyone enjoys our small group. We'll see you in a few minutes.
One way to displace the questions, actually, is just to think about, before we call it spiritual or psychological, before we call it religious or secular, perhaps the starting point is to ask, what interactions do we have with the world around us? What problems face us, right? And so to approach human experience, not as a thing, but rather as forms of interaction. We're all interacting. We're constantly interacting. We're constantly adapting to our environment. So to take a more biological, evolutionary approach to this idea of experience, and then to ask, what is the quality of these interactions that we're having with our experience? If it's helping me to deal with forms of trauma, then let's call it psychological healing, right? If it has these other layers that have everything to do with values, ideals, convictions, stuff that you want to organize your entire life around, rather than just get over a particular problem, something that points you in the direction of ultimacy, of ultimate value, to use Tillich's language, right? Then maybe we can start to call that spiritual. But the point being that what I was trying to get across is that, rather than starting with the idea that spirituality does this or that, what if we started with the question, what am I doing? What are we doing? What is the world doing to interact with the problems that confront us? In light of that interaction, then can we say that it's psychological, spiritual, secular, all of these things? But to start with that active mode of existence, rather than to start with the definitional. That's what pragmatism allows us to do. It allows us to look at the effects of our actions, the possible effects of an idea, and then ex post facto, after the fact, to say, hey, yeah, that's religious. That was spiritual because it did this thing to me. It caused this effect in me. It changed my community. It led me in this new direction. So it's kind of changing the way that we think about religion and spirituality in terms of looking at the effects. I hope that's helpful. Something like assuming that there's a continuum between the anthropological and the dogmatic, which I believe there is. Then the question becomes, where do we put the emphasis? But just the second point here, though, is one that's interesting. There are many things in our life that are not captured by words. And the pragmatists got that. They realize that there's all of these things that happen in experience, which is our interaction with the world around us, with others, that we may call love, that we may call surprise, that we may call susto, right? But even those words approximate this experience that we undergo. So it's at the same time, we need to be cognizant that language is not going to capture all of it as well. So how do we honor experience as it is, the pragmatists would say, as it is undergone, as we actually experience it? And we may not have the right language for it, but we know that it was there. Like when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, like what is that exactly, right? I can't get, maybe it's susto, maybe it's something else, but I know what the feeling is because I underwent that experience, right? And so it's accounting for all of experience, even when we don't have words that are appropriate to that experience.
Well, I just wanted to then offer a word of thank you again, Chris. Muchas gracias. What a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I have to say that these exchanges are muy rico, muy profundo, and have really opened up conversations that I think that will take us beyond what we do as faculty, what I do as faculty, and what I think many of you as students also in the classroom. It takes us to other places. So thank you so much for the rich exchange tonight and for the work you're doing. And we look forward to the publication of your book and to be able to have it as a resource for the work that we do. And I wanted to thank our host institutions, Sacred Heart, and I want to thank Boston College, the School of Theology and Ministry, for being the co-host tonight and for helping us to spread the word. I want to thank each of you for taking the time, I know from busy schedules, from family time, to be with us. The first Wednesday of every month at 7 o'clock, we have our exchange. Next month in November will be November the 3rd. Our exchange will be with Dr. Tirres Delgado, who will be talking about ecological racism and looking at the impact of the ecological degradation on our communities. So we invite you to be a part of that. There's another important conversation. We talk about ecology and the earth and all of the issues that are happening. And Dr. Delgado will be speaking that evening. So mark your calendars, November the 3rd at 7 o'clock. And again, please remember the Alumni Network is now live. Join, sign up, go to the webpage, sign up and register. If you want to be part of the council to kind of get things together, begin to put our ideas together so that we can begin to work and organize our alums and the creativity that I know is there, please let us know. We will be following up with you as you sign up and as you register. And hopefully, if you know someone who wasn't here tonight, you know that they're an alum, you know that they were with you in HSP. I had Rosie was telling that she went to the HSP back in I think it was 2016, and she still remains friends with some of the people there. So there are, relationships that have formed at the HSP that become longtime friendships. So if you know someone, let them know that the Alumni Network is live and ask them to join. If you're a student, HSP is having its 33rd Hispanic Summer Program summer session at Duke Divinity School next year in June. Our classes would be advertised in 2 weeks. We have 7 fantastic classes like we do every year. And we're looking forward. So again, if you know a student, a classmate of yours who wasn't here tonight, wants to know about the program, applications go live the Monday after Thanksgiving. And I know it's early to say that now, but people have been asking. And once again, Tirres, muchas gracias, Chris. Verdaderamente un abrazo grande con mucha gratitud. And to everyone, un abrazo grande. Have a wonderful evening. Oh, good to see everyone. And be well. Blessings to you. Have a great rest of the week. I hope the semester is going well for you. In your ministry, I hope things are going well, all that you do. And may God's grace and peace and joy be with you. And we'll see you next week.
Sounds Drive.